Good evening. This is the Board of School Directors meeting for the Boyertown Area School District for May 19th, 2020. We want to take this opportunity to remind everyone for a little bit of information regarding using Zoom. If you are logged in through a phone and you are signed up to participate in the public comment, the following commands can be entered using your touch tones on your phone. *6 to toggle for mute and unmute, but you will not be able to speak until I actually unmute you during that section of the agenda. We do want to remind everyone to please turn off any exterior or surrounding sounds so that we do not pick up background noise. At this time, I will turn the meeting over to the president to begin the roll call.
All right, thank you. Yes, can we please begin, we'll officially call this meeting to session. Can we begin with a roll call vote?
Mrs. Denon?
Here.
Mr. Brophy?
Here.
Ms. Nyman?
Here.
Mrs. McWhorter?
Here.
Mr. Updegrove?
Here.
Mr. Hemingway?
Here.
Ms. Deeroff?
Present.
Mrs. Hogan?
Present.
Mr. Foose?
Here.
All present.
All right, next we'll do Pledge of Allegiance followed by a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic one nation, under God, indivisible,
One nation,
with liberty and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
All right. Are we able to I'll move to the agenda here. So next is announcement of previous executive session. And we have 3 since our last meeting. So April 17th, the Board of School Directors met in executive session for 1 hour on personnel and legal. On May 12th, the Board of School Directors met for 1 hour, 7 minutes on personnel and legal. And on May 18th, the board met for 3 hours and 11 minutes on personnel. Next, we have public comment period number 1. And Dr. Bedden, the names that you provided, were those for period number 1?
I sent the list over, but let me see if I can spot them.
Oh, sorry, I just was clarifying, were they for session 1? Yes, for period number 1.
Yes, yep.
Looks like it was an exclamation point instead of a 1 here.
Can you call out the first name
Right, so
again? I'm searching the list.
Yes, we have 2 folks signed up. So first we have Christian Fowkes.
Christian Fowkes is here, and I'm gonna press the allow talk. They are unmuted now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we do. Oh, sorry, Christian. There is an announcement that's typically read at this time. However, I'm having a little trouble pulling that up. Are you familiar with the 3 minutes and the 30-minute overall time period?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to find that, but please proceed.
My name is Christian Fowkes, and I speak to you tonight as a community member, a parent, and educator. I have 20 years of experience in the classroom, 10 years as coordinator of my school's Student Assistance Program, or SAP, a master's degree in curriculum instruction, and my principal certification. After watching the video of the Finance Committee again last night, I fear that this board has come to the conclusion on the matter of letting 20 teachers go. I hope this is not true, though, so I will continue to speak. I realize that school budgets across our country are in the red, but we did not arrive in this situation because of COVID alone. The pandemic is merely shining a light on the mismanagement of this district over the years by several boards. While some of you have only recently begun to serve, there are members of this board who have been part of those boards in the past that got us here today. Those board members and the ones of the past are the reason we find ourselves here, not COVID. Those board members arrived with an agenda from a loud yet small group which kept proper funding of this district well below what was needed, all at the expense of the voiceless students who would be impacted by a misguided ideology. As any educator will tell you, students who are not at grade level in reading by grade 3 are less likely to ever attain grade level reading ability. So for those most vulnerable students entering kindergarten or sitting in 3rd grade right now, the effects of this mismanagement will follow them for a lifetime. Now is not the time to lose teachers. A loss of teachers undoubtedly means an increase in class size. Students returning to whatever school may look like next year need smaller class sizes, not only to differentiate and help combat the COVID slide or loss of learning, but also to address the social and emotional needs of our students as this pandemic brought different degrees of trauma to us all. Teachers are the key to meeting these needs. Yet here we are looking at a board that may let 20 of Boyertown's best go. COVID has shown us that the improper management of the Boyertown area school district will have a generational impact, as those early learners may never recover from this. I say to anyone listening, please carefully observe what happens here tonight. Research your board members, find out how they have voted. Consider if they represent the students first or another group. After all, this is a board representing a school district whose job it is to fully and faithfully educate its children. If this board is to put students first, then we will not lose teachers tonight. We will find other ways to address an unbalanced budget. Thank you for giving me this time.
Thank you for your comments, and we have one other person signed up this evening for period number 1, and that is
Okay.
Mrs. Kim Edwards.
Give me one second to find that person, Mr. Fowkes. For some reason the system is acting up on me. Can you repeat the name again, Mr. Fowkes? I'm looking for them.
Yes, it's Kim Edwards. When I type in Edwards in the attendees pane, it shows up.
Found her. Okay, she's unmuted. Miss Edwards?
It looks like
Miss Edwards?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time. I've been a financial advisor for the last 16 years, and I've lived in the school district for the last 15 years, with both of my boys, currently a sophomore and a junior at the high school, having grown up their entire lives in this district. As such, I wish to address the agenda item of the consideration and vote to cut 20 untenured teacher positions in the district. While I agree with Christian, and I hope that this vote doesn't even come to fruition, based on how things have run in the past, I'm not confident that this is not going to happen in some way. So there's just a little reminder that I'd like to bring to the board's attention. 3 years ago, the school board voted to make an investment in the Bash music program. This was an investment of over $90,000, which was made in the form of brand new, beautiful uniforms for our award-winning, and it was an investment that was long overdue. I want to remind the board, as they start to make these very tough decisions of which teachers to cut at this time, that investments are a long-term commitment. A homeowner does not invest over $90,000 in home improvements only to then let their home suffer from neglect and disrepair. A small business owner does not invest over $90,000 into their business only to be lazy and not work hard to keep that business growing and flourishing. A student does not invest over $90,000 into a post-secondary education only to move back home after graduation to play video games and Netflix binge in mom and dad's basement with no drive for the future or making that investment work for them. Most importantly, a school board should not use over $90,000 of taxpayer money to make an investment into a program within the district, only to potentially cut the foundation of that investment at the knees 3 years later, especially when it is a consistently high-performing investment with a high rate of return, as well as one which provides a draw to the school district. This investment has contributed to the Bash Marching Unit earning multiple state championships and performing at a national level, as well as a high number of students performing at county, district, state, national levels throughout all facets of our district's music program, including band, orchestra, and chorus. From the elementary levels to the middle schools and the high school, the teachers of the Boyertown Area School District Music Program are the very foundation of the over $90,000 investment that you, as a board, made 3 years ago. As you start to consider which teachers to cut at this very difficult time for our country, not just our district, I implore you to consider seeing your initial $90,000+ investment through and not wasting taxpayer dollars by pulling out of that investment prematurely, whether immediately or in the
30
months.
seconds.
Thank you for your time. Thank you all for all that you are trying to do for our students and our district as we all try to navigate these uncertain times together. One Boyertown.
Thank you for your comments. So that concludes public comment period number 1. And next on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for the April 21st meeting. Can we get a motion for the minutes?
McWhorter moves.
Jim Brophy, approved.
Order moves and Mr. Brophy seconded. Can we do a roll call vote?
Yeah, that's fine.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
All right, the next item on the agenda is one that is often skipped over, the report of the president. However, this evening I do have a statement. I want to, for full disclosure, let everyone know that this was prepared as a joint effort. I've been very busy today speaking with people within the district and parents and what have you. So I had a chance to preview this briefly. So please forgive me if I stumble over any of my words. Good evening. The following statement was collaboratively developed between cabinet members and board leadership after agreeing in executive session as a board that such a statement would be beneficial. As board president, I volunteered to deliver these remarks. Just as the pandemic has caused challenges for educational programming and school life in general, it has also negatively impacted our district's finances. Over the past several weeks, you may have heard about many school districts across the Commonwealth facing financial difficulties due to the COVID-19 crisis. Our school district is not immune from these difficulties. The timing of these difficulties creates additional challenges for BASD. As recent as March of this year, we had discussed a budget that for the second year in a row would rely on less than $1 million from dedicated fund balance. This has been achieved through a combination of cost reductions and revenue increases, was a major improvement from years prior, and was a necessary focal point in order to structurally regain our footing. It was a sign that we were nearly fully recovered from the 2008 financial crisis that had led to broad cuts within our district in 2011, a year when our school district faced a projected $5 million shortfall. BASD has been and continues to be greatly dependent on local revenue for school funding, given that we are not eligible to receive comparable funding from federal and state sources. Therefore, since the majority of our district expenditures are paid using local dollars, we are most likely going to experience financial challenges this coming school year and possibly be impacted even more significantly by the loss of local revenue during the following school year, 21-22. Consequently, our substantial projected deficits over the next few school years will require us to make some very difficult decisions to keep BASD operational. We have been reviewing many budgetary options over the past few weeks during both public and executive sessions. None of the choices provided have been pleasant or desirable. Since 2014, BASD has operated with expenditures exceeding revenue, an unbalanced structural budget that had resulted in us using our fund balance or savings account to balance our budget. As was noted, pre-COVID-19, we were making progress in getting our fiscal affairs in order. We were decreasing our dependence on using fund balance amounts to less than $1 million per year. And last year, we were able to replace the roughly $800,000 we borrowed by ending the school year with approximately $800,000 surplus at the end of the year, in part due to vacancies we had hoped to fill. Before COVID-19, our budget for this year, the 2019-2020 school year, was projected again to close out with a positive balance. The projected 2020-2021 budget shortfall was already over $1 million. However, with the onset of the pandemic, BASD's budget deficit projections escalated to approximately $6 million without a tax increase and roughly $3.1 million with a tax increase as a result of the projected budget deficits associated with lost revenue in but not limited to the following areas: real estate taxes, $1.4 million, earned income taxes, $400,000, real estate transfer tax, $116,000, basic education subsidy, $115,000, transportation subsidy, $1.02 million. Again, these projected changes came between the time period where our preliminary budget was presented and the lead up to a proposed final budget, a matter of a few weeks. What follows is a discussion about the actions that have already been taken. When considering what areas or items to trim from our budget, it's necessary to keep in mind that significant budget reductions have been occurring since 2011 up through the present day that limit current and future choices without devastating our academic programs. Most recently, during the 2019-2020 budget process, BASD acted on over $1 million in cost reductions and raised taxes to the adjusted Act 1 index. During the 2020-2021 budget process, BASD has already cut over $2.5 million in additional costs, proposed raising taxes to the adjusted Act 1 index, eliminated an administrative position, and implemented efficiency and effectiveness measures, and was still facing an approximate $1.6 million shortfall. Since the start of the COVID-19 impact, we have taken additional actions that included but are not limited to the following: reduce the scope of a planned construction project, specifically the elimination of a maintenance building; deferred the much-deserved compensation equity plan for our classified staff; reaffirmed a commitment to implement a tax increase to the adjusted Act 1 index; discussed various options with our employee groups related to compensation, which has resulted in our cabinet and Act 93 administrators indicating their willingness to consider a pay freeze during the next budget cycle. During tonight's board meeting, we will be considering a proposed 2020-2021 final budget. Even after including an increase of $2.2 million in real estate taxes, additional cuts totaling almost $3 million, and projected use of fund balance of $1.6 million. The revised budget, with currently anticipated COVID-19 impacts factored in, still has a $1.8 million shortfall. None of the board members or administrators feel good about the remaining choices available to overcome the additional $1.8 million deficit. The alternative options would also impact staffing and quality of our educational programs. These options include reducing things like counseling services, field trips, school security, wholesale reductions in athletics, the reduction of non-required elective programs, including music, world languages, art, business education, health and phys ed, and family and consumer sciences, and tech ed, as well as dual enrollment programs and/or transportation services. To reiterate, these options were deemed as even less desirable and would impact staffing and education as well. In closing, while trying to minimize the impact on our educational program this upcoming school year, the following year is projected to be worse if the economy does not rapidly recover. Tonight's decisions are difficult, but next year may be even tougher locally, as well as for other public school districts in the Commonwealth. We have worked collaboratively with our Education Association on the proposed plan for furloughs found on tonight's agenda. This includes a process and procedure for how to bring back our teachers when possible. I also want to note that the MOU is being reviewed and will need to be finalized by the association. We remain hopeful that the district and the administration will work together to address the significant fiscal challenges that are on the horizon for the sake of all of our students and staff. That concludes the President's report. I will submit that in writing for the record. Next on our agenda is the Treasurer's report.
Mr. Hayes, you're muted.
Mr. Hayes, which document are you going to first?
I'm going to cover the revenue and expenditure report. I believe that's page 5. The first one showing the revenues and expenditures on the bottom half. Next, the upcoming page. Thank you. Some of the highlights of the March 2020 Treasurer's Report, I want to cover local revenue. Earned income tax was approximately $700,000 collected for the month of March. And delinquent real estate tax was approximately $273,000, and tax collectors accounted for approximately $73,000. In regards to state revenue, the PDE retirement subsidy was approximately $2 million. The transportation subsidy was $500,000, and the special ed subsidy was $360,000. In federal revenue, Title I was approximately $46,000, and Title IIA was approximately $10,000. In regards to March expenditures, salaries and benefits accounts for 63% of the monthly expenditures. And that concludes the March Treasurer's Report highlights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. So the recommended action is for the Board of School Directors to approve the Treasurer's Report as presented. Do we have a motion?
Hogan motion.
Denon moves.
I'll go motion.
McWhorter.
I heard them all come through at the same time. So I'll go with Denon as moving, and I don't recall who was second. I heard McWhorter, so I'll just go with Ms. McWhorter as seconding. So can we please have a roll call vote?
any discussion before we go to the vote?
Yes, apologies for that. Does anybody have any comments, questions on the treasurer's report? All right, hearing none, let's move to the roll call.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Nyman,
No.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deroff,
No.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-2.
The next item on tonight's agenda is the secretary's report,
No report.
and then followed by the solicitor's report.
No report.
We now move to the superintendent's report.
No report for the superintendent, but I will go to the consent agenda portion of the superintendent's report. On the consent agenda for the board, we'd like to introduce item 10A, policy 008, organizational chart for the second reading and approval for the first reading being waived. That adds an update to the supervisory support positions that were previously approved by the board on February 25th. Item 10B is the solicitor appointment for the fiscal year 2020-2021. Item 10C is approval of the 2020 general obligation bonds. Item 10D is a resolution to expand the scope of the use of funds for the 2019 general obligation bond. 10E is the 2020-2021 food service budget approval. Item 10F is bid awards for the 2020-2021 school year supplies. Item 10G is a reappointment for the approval of the reappointment for Mr. Lamar Hayes to be the board treasurer. 10H is an audit entry adjustment, entry authorization. And item 10I, at this point, we would request that the board of school directors approve the consent agenda as presented.
All right, do we have a motion for the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion. I gave the motion.
Quarter moves.
Hemingway makes the motion.
Yeah, for some reason,
Roger can have it.
I hear them all at the same time.
Mr. President,
I
Mr.
believe I
Hemingway
heard
made
Mr.
a motion,
Hemingway
but
and Mr. Updegrove, so we'll go on
Mr.
that order.
Updegrove chimed in. Yeah.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the vote?
Yes. Can I just confirm, Mr. Foose, because there was a lot of talking at the same time. Was that Mr. Hemingway moving and Mr. Updegrove seconding?
That was what I had heard. So I think it's fine to put that.
Okay. Mrs. Denon?
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deroff,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. President, moving on to the itemized agenda. Item 11A is Fidavia Contract Phase 2 for the Adam Project. This item was a part of the Finance and Facilities and Operation Committee meeting on May 12th. And a contract with Fidavia LLC was presented for the Clerk of Work Services. The services include oversight for the design, pre-construction, and bidding phase of the project for $16,000. During the construction phase, the fee will be $16,200 per month until the project is completed. At that committee meeting, the majority of the Finance, Facilities, and Operations Committee authorized this item to be moved forward. At this point, we're recommending that the Board of School Directors approve the Fidavia Contract Phase 2 Adam project as presented.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion for this item?
Denon moves.
Stenen?
Brophy second.
Mr. Brophy seconds. Any comments or questions on the Fidavia contract?
I have my hand up.
All right, Ms. Deroff.
I just want to make sure that it's in the contract, and I did read over it, but I just want to make sure that if something like this were to happen again, because we got caught in this before where we had to pay more money because the project wasn't done on time, I want to make sure that this is ironclad, that they can't charge us any more money no matter what would happen.
I would say it is not ironclad, Ms. Giroff. We have to be fair to our contractors that if there's something that is beyond their control, that, you know, they're not doing work because they have their costs as well. However, I did send that off to the solicitor's office because there are provisions in there that allow us to go to a day-by-day cost if there are extended weather delays. And then what was added in there as well, because this is obviously a new thing to us, is if there would be another shutdown because due to COVID-19. So we do have those protections in there. I'm not going to say it's ironclad, but I think we have good protections in there to protect ourselves.
What would happen if we had to put some type of something that they had to install different things, or they had to have their workers so far apart and this caused them extra money? Is that going to go back on us?
Well, now remember, this is not the contractors themselves. This is
I
the
realize that.
construction manager. Again, it's a little bit different than the contractors because they're providing purely a service. I did ask for the language to include the delays. I don't think there's an ironclad guarantee. I don't know that we could get anybody to do construction management for us if we were trying to put that kind of a provision into a contract. I think we've protected ourselves as well as we possibly can.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands up. Does anybody else want to make a comment or have any questions before moving to the roll call? All right, seeing and hearing none, we'll move to the roll call vote.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deroff,
Yes.
Mrs. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Moving on to item 11B. 11B is the land development agreement that is required as part of the building permit process. The board was presented the agreement for phase 2 of the Adam project that must be executed as part of the start of this construction project. The administration is recommending that the Board of School Directors approve the land development agreement as presented to the board.
All right, thank you. And can we get a motion and a second?
Motion, Jim Brophy.
Mr. Brophy, is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Mr. Updegrove,
I'll second.
seconds. Any comment? All right, thank you, Rob. Mr. Updegrove, any comments or questions on this item? I don't see any hands raised at this time. Definitely jump in if I miss you. Let's move to a roll call vote.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deroff,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Item number 11C is approval of the stormwater control and best management practice agreement for the Adam project. This agreement is required as part of the building permit process. The attached agreement that was presented to the board as part of phase 2 of the Adam project must be executed prior to the start of the construction. At this time, the administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approve the stormwater control and best management practices agreement as presented.
Daryl moves.
Thank you, Ms. Deroff. Do we have a second?
McWhorter seconds.
Denon
Daryl
seconds.
moves.
All right, we'll go with Ms. Deroff is the original motion and Ms. McWhorter seconded. Please move to the, any comments or questions on this, the stormwater? All right, let's move to the roll call vote.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deroff,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Item number 11D. 11D is a purchase of the lighting for the softball field that is a part of the Adam project, and also our efforts to make sure we are in compliance with Title IX. Musco Sports Lighting has submitted a quote through the Keystone Purchasing Network for the cost of $189,900. This item was forwarded by the majority of the members participating in the Finance and Facilities and Operations Committee. The administration recommends that the Board of Directors approve this purchase of the softball field lighting from Musco Sports Lighting by the quote that was submitted through the Keystone Purchasing Network.
Daryl moves.
Ms. Deroff, thank you. And do we have a second?
Brophy second.
Updegrove second.
We'll go with Mr. Brophy. I believe I heard Mr. Brophy in there as a second. Any comments or questions on the softball field lighting? All right, let's move to the roll call.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deroff,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Item number 11E. 11E is a memorandum of understanding regarding elimination and non-renewal of temporary professional employees' positions. In response to the economic implications of the COVID-19 pandemic, Revenue projections have been revised downward. This results in a significant deficit for the 2020-2021 budget as presented at the most recent Finance, Facilities, and Operations Committee meeting. To address the deficit and the long-term financial health of the school district, the administration has proposed cost-saving measures beyond the ones implemented prior to the pandemic. The largest portion of the district's budget is salaries and benefits, accounting for approximately 70% of the budget. In its long-standing efforts to cooperate with the district to address the fiscal needs of the district, we have been working with the association on a memorandum of understanding in place of the district adopting a resolution to address the elimination non-renewal of 18 temporary professional employees listed in the memorandum of understanding for the upcoming fiscal year in an effort to address the remaining fiscal challenges totaling of about $1.8 million. In exchange, the district will provide a good and valuable consideration and providing certain rights set forth in that document to which the temporary professional employees would not otherwise be entitled under the school code or collective bargaining agreement, which is the board's and the district's commitment to make them a priority and bringing them back as soon as the economic conditions or changes and opportunities make themselves available. At this time, the administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approve the memorandum of understanding regarding the elimination and non-renewal of temporary professional employees and positions as presented, subject to, as mentioned earlier, that approval and agreement by the association, I believe, in their meeting at a later date.
Denon moves.
McWhorter
Denon
seconds.
moves. McWhorter seconds. So questions, comments on this memorandum of understanding?
Brandon, I can't put my hand up.
Yes, Mr. Brophy, go ahead.
All right, I have some comments to make first. And I thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to speak on this. Since my election to the school board back in November, I've had the unpleasant duty to take part in 3 separate issues. First, being closing down a school at the end of this year. Second, being part of moving from an in-person school graduation to a virtual one. And now taking part in a vote to replace our school family through no fault of their own into a furlong of undetermined length. That is not how I envisioned my first 6 months as a Boyertown School Board Director. I envisioned looking to assist to taking Boyertown schools to a place of better financial stability and improving our programs and overall school experience. However, none of us foresaw a global emergency that would see a clamping down of our country and long-term non-sustainable economic policies that are crippling our state and greatly impacting our overall school funding. Personally, I believe the economy will bounce back quickly, that the American people and the people of our district will find a way through this and again move forward with their lives. I'm an optimist in this. However, I am not an economist and no way an expert in these matters. Those who are regarded as the experts in this area have predicted a longer downturn with deep revenue losses. As an elected official, I am duty bound to ignore my gut feelings and respect that advice. Now, moving on to what we're actually talking about tonight. The job of the administration is to run our schools. That means provide the best education for our students at all times and also work within the boundaries of the money the district can provide. That means putting together a budget that addresses those goals and is achievable inside those parameters. The job of the board is to oversee the health and schools of the schools by holding administrative accountable to the district goals and provide the environment and necessary funds for these objectives. Additionally, the board also represents the people of the district in what they believe is proper and correct means of educating their children. So another great part of our job is listening to those who make up the Boyertown School District community. I assure you, we do that. Answering the board addressed emails is done by the president, Mr. Fowkes, but all the board members read those emails. Rest assured of that. This year, the administration has presented us with a budget for approval. They've spent many hours reviewing many alternatives in many areas. You heard the board president go over that. Now they've come to us with what they believe is the best option. And we, the board, are now required to act on the recommendations. Our job is to agree with and pass the budget, or disagree and vote no to the presented documents. Unfortunately, the budget this year is not the best alternatives, but rather options that have less negative effects. We will be voting on a budget for which none of us has shown any enthusiasm. But clearly, through what has been presented, we have clearly defined choices. The present budget is designed to maintain solvency and have additional funds available should next year prove be even more challenging, as is predicted, than it has been this year. Or we can choose to ignore the problem, continue with our business as usual, and reject the budget as presented. As rewards versus consequence scenario, on the reward side, we would continue to maintain our staff and to simply take more money from our general funds. Most of the Boyertown School District would be very happy with that outcome, and education will continue on as in the past. We would then hope for a full economic recovery very quickly. On the consequence side, we could either next year or the following year enter into insolvency, and a consequence of that end up as receivership being run by Harrisburg. That consequence has never turned out well when it has happened. No one would be happy with that outcome. To me, that outcome is not only unpalatable, it's scary. As voters, you get to express your desire and what you believe is right. That's the American way, and that's how the country is designed to operate. You can loudly say keeping all our staff is the right answer. You can do that. You could also say at the same time saying solvent is the right answer. Both answers are correct. Both answers are correct for quality education. However, in this case, we can't have two right answers. As a board member, you're elected official, I must make a call on which answer is right to choose. The consequence of a slow recovery leaves us with a consequence that is just too dire to even think about. In the absence of any alternatives that produce enough savings to offset costs, I must pick the option that keeps the district solvent. With that being said, I now reluctantly announce my intention to vote for the proposed school budget and the additional resolutions as presented. In that, I also state that I'm fully aware that through more regulations, schools next year could be radically different from what they are and what we're used to seeing, and this entire budget exercise could become outdated. However, I cannot vote based on unknowns of that type, so I'm voting only what I know at this time. I am open to any board member who has consequential savings ideas to present them in such a way influence my vote before this is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brody. All right, I have two additional people in the queue, and then I will add Ms. Deeroff to that. So first I have Ms. McWhirter, followed by Mrs. Denon, and then Mrs. Deeroff.
Thank you.
Ms. McWhirter, I think you're muted.
Ms. McWhirter, you're currently on mute.
Thank you. So again, I just have some notes that I'm reading from, and I just want to remind people that if they've been following the meetings for over the past year and a half, they know that we've been in a budget crisis. And you know that with COVID-19 came some disastrous results for our upcoming budget. We have a lot of unknowns that are coming in the future. What's school going to look like next year? What's our revenue going to look like next year? And what will our expenditures look like for next year? And I have to give our administration, Dr. Bedden, Mrs. Torsha, Mr. Stout, Dr. Kim, and Mrs. Pitts a lot of kudos, because they have been sitting through so many meetings, keeping up on the legislative changes that have been going on. And Mrs. Pitts in particular, with respect to our budget, I know has been in a lot of meetings trying to make sense of all that's been going on. And she was in fact working on Mother's Day. So these guys are working hard. And all of the information that she's found and she's put forward, it's on board docs. And they've also put a lot of effort into finding ways to cut our expenses. to and to find more ways for more revenue. And they've worked hard, and we are at a point now where we have to make cuts above and beyond our normal expenses. So I just want to say that I too am supporting the memorandum of understanding with the teachers. And this has been a very difficult decision, but there have been a lot of difficult decisions, and this seems like the lesser of the evils. None of us are very happy about that, about the choices that we have going on right now. And also, I just want to remind everyone that this coming year, the 2021 budget is going to be difficult, but the 21-22 budget is expected to be even more challenging. So prepare yourselves, because we are in for a crazy ride. And I too will be supporting our budget. I just wanted to let you all know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McWhorter. Next, I have Mrs. Denon, followed by Ms. Deeroff, and then Mrs. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Foose. I just wanted to say that I too have been reading all of the emails from the parents, and I have spoken as for myself and not for the board, because I do know that the board president will be responding to each and every one of you who sent in your thoughtful comments. So I do understand this is a heart-wrenching decision. It has caused a lot of angst for all of us, and I don't think any of us ever thought we would be in this position. After years of the state not funding education and school boards not properly funding education by raising our taxes to the proper level, we did find ourselves in a precarious situation. And we have just over the past couple of years been getting on a more stable fiscal ground. So it has been very disappointing that we have to go here with the furlough of these great teachers. And I just think that unfortunately, it does have to do with COVID. And if it wasn't for COVID, we would not be making these decisions. We, as someone who sits on the PSBA, representative to the Pennsylvania School Board Association, I am very in tune to what is going on in Harrisburg. And the scary part of this is that we might be facing a $2 to $3 to $4 million deficit. Harrisburg is looking at a $4 to $6 billion deficit this year. And they're going to be, like we are, finding a way to get that money back. And we can only get more money by raising taxes and approving budgets that are balanced. And Harrisburg has not even approved their budget, and they can borrow money, and they can choose by voting of the legislature how much they are going to provide to school districts. So the biggest unknown for us going forward is how much we will be getting from the state to fund our local schools. So that is a huge concern. The other concern is that there has been talk in Harrisburg that they would they would not allow school districts to raise property taxes. And if that goes through either next budget year or the year after, that is something that we would not have any control over. And we would be seeing even less money than we are seeing now. So as Mr. Foose, you spoke earlier in his president's report, this is unfortunately the perfect storm of things that can happen to school districts. I consider our school district in some ways lucky because we actually do have a savings account where we don't have to become insolvent and we don't have to be taken over by the state. And that is the last thing that any school district would want to do. So I think although these are very, very difficult decisions, this is the right decision to make sure that we keep our school district funded and with the least amount of impact on our students. And I think that if
Time's up.
Yep. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. So
If you
I will.
mind, complete
Time's
your
up.
thought.
Okay, I will also. So I'll just say, I'll just wrap it up, and I'll just say that I too will be voting for
Time's
this,
up
and I
now.
will be voting for the budget.
Okay. So I do want to, on the one hand, remind, and thank you for your comments. I do want to remind all of our board members that we've agreed, similar to the public, to try to keep our comments to under 3 minutes. And I know that this is a very heavy topic, so I'm trying to be understanding and mindful of that. But also, yes, let's please try to keep our commentary to 3 minutes. But also, I'll do my best to interject when the moment presents itself. Please allow me as president to do that. And I apologize for not doing that more timely, but let's please try to keep our comments to 3 minutes. Next, I have Ms. Deeroff, Ms. Hogan, and Ms. Nyman.
I'm going to keep my comments very short and sweet. The teachers out there are like family to me. I've been on this board a long time. I'm voting against the furlough of the teachers tonight. If someone can show me where we have exhausted every option of reducing expenses that do not directly impact the education of our children, then I'll rethink my vote. This was a hard decision for me to make, realizing that we are out of money. It's not, we only have a little, we're out of money. But to me, the children come first. It should not be about the money. I'm worried about them when they come back in the fall with their social and educational needs. We need to do this for the children. That's why I'm here. And I really appreciate administration, how hard they work to try to work something out. But I think we need to do a little bit more and not furlough all these teachers. I told you mine would be short and sweet. That's it. Thank you very much. I'm voting no.
Thank you. Next, I have Ms. Hogan, and then Ms. Nyman.
Yes, thank you. I agree with my colleague that children do come first, which is why I am actually going to vote yes. I have a second grader, so she will be impacted. I have a middle school child that's also in the district. It's possible that he will be impacted. But children do come first, which is why I also agree with Mr. Brophy that we must keep this district solvent. This is a hard decision, and it's painful. Nobody wants to do this, but again, solvency, I think, is the issue here. We cannot become insolvent. That's not good for the teachers in this district. It's not good for the students. It's not good for the community. So I will be voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one minor thing to point out for everyone as well. Please direct comments, just to depersonalize everything, please direct comments to the presiding officer, just to avoid specifically referencing another board, even if it's in praise. That's also another one of our procedures. Next, Ms. Nyman, please.
Okay, thank you. This has been a very, very hard decision, and I've spent most of the night thinking about it, not getting much sleep. But in all good conscience, I have to remember I was elected by the people in Region 1, and I represent those people and the students. And though my son has graduated from Boyertown, I have 3 grandchildren, and I have to think about children, whether they're in high school, middle school, or elementary, and I have to put them first. All of this was caused by no fault of administration, no fault of the board, no fault of anybody. but our children and their education are first. And what this has done to some children and the things I'm hearing, they're going to be behind when we come back in August, if we come back in August. And I cannot, in all good conscience, vote to furlough 20 teachers. Not until we have exhausted every option out there. And I don't think we've exhausted every option. If I knew we exhausted every option and we came down with more money, I could maybe consider furloughing a couple of them. But right now is not the time to be furloughing these teachers. I don't want one child, not one child, to not have the education they're supposed to be getting. And I'm very fearful of what's going to happen when they come back and we have higher class size. These teachers are going to be going bonkers because of all that has happened with these kids. I don't know how a teacher is going to handle this, let alone how all of our students are going to handle all of this. So I have got to put our students first. And people have contacted me, people have emailed all of us. And I represent the people of Region 1, and I'm hearing them loud and clear, and they are saying no. So I have to vote no for tonight.
All right, thank you. I have a couple more people that have requested some commentary. Mr. Updegrove, followed by Mr. Hemingway. And then I believe Ms. Hogan wanted to get back in the queue as well.
Yes, as a board member, a new one, I do not want to see this school district head down the road to bankruptcy. I have to vote a yes on this because I think next year we got another big issue to confront, and we will confront that issue and we will survive through it. But as of right now, our big issue is get through this budget. It's an ungodly thing we have to do, but it's a decision that has to be made, and I will vote yes to save the school district down the road, hopefully. Thank you.
Next, I have Mr. Hemingway.
All right, first off, I'm going to say I'm not going to make any political defensive game remarks here. This is not what this is about. This is an unpopular decision that we all need to make. To be honest with you, I let my emotions get ahead of me a little bit on this decision. And I've learned a lot in the last few weeks by going through the information that was provided to us, the strategies that our administration has discussed with us, some of the forecasts, some of the effort that Mrs. Pitts has given to us. They are the experts in the field of what we need to go down the line. And, you know, I struggled back and forth. I said, seems to make sense. Then when you start to put a face to some of of these people who could potentially be furloughed, it hits home. I know these people. They're my friends. I need to face them. So then that comes across. Do I let my emotions make my decision, or do I need to let my fact finding and sense of what I feel is best for our district dictate my decision? I think what's presented is the best thing for our kids at the moment. I think it does put our kids first. It's providing them the education and the programs without a lot of interruption. Because that would be the alternative. If we don't go with these furloughs, something has to give, and that'll be directly impacting our kids. I have to look at the long-term longevity of our district. I need to work. I have a fifth grader, so I want her to have the opportunities as she progresses through her school career. But I also have an obligation to the girls and boys after her. so that we have a strong district and try to set that up for the future. And I think what is proposed to us is a good strategy. It does put the kids first. It is a good plan to set us up for success for whatever happens down the line, of which we don't know. So I'd rather be prepared and be proactive and be in a position that we can react when next year is thrown at us. I appreciate the time to kind of just give a little bit of my journey in my decision, but I'm gonna vote yes. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Next I have Ms. Hogan.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate that this board has looked at what I believe to be every option available. I don't see another place that we could cut from right now. There have been many, many cuts made in the past few years to help us become more financially stable. So we're really like bare bones, in my opinion. If any other board member has an idea of where those cuts can come from, I would urge them to voice that now before we vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. Checking to see if anyone else wants to raise their hand for any questions or comments. I'm not seeing any at the moment, so I'd like to weigh in as well. I did read the commentary at the beginning. Obviously, it's pretty clear when somebody's reading something. I thought about preparing some wording because this is really difficult, and I wanted to make sure that I captured my thoughts, much like my colleagues. I think there's been a lot of time spent on this, a whole lot of emotional energy has been expended. Thinking about this from all angles, I see it as both a decision of the numbers. They don't work out. We have, as was shown, we have a number of really bad choices to select from. And in recognizing that, this seemed, as you know, being presented to us in the way that it is, this seems like the only real option. A lot of the other options impact staff, impact students in ways that I think are more dramatic. This would, if the MOU is adopted, and it does require partnership, but if the MOU is adopted, it does show a collective understanding of the severity of where we're at as a district. And I think that's really important that we can demonstrate that. So I'm very hopeful that we're able to move forward with this MOU. It also provides additional considerations for that staff, the recall rights and things of that nature, which is better than the alternative. But another reason that I think this edges out some of the other options that we had that were put before us. Financially, I thought we were doing much better heading into this budget. And it's been a really tough road. I think Dr. Bedden, the administration, the business office, everybody in that cabinet has been working real hard to try to turn this around. And I thought we were close. And then there's a global pandemic. It seems like when it rains, it pours, and definitely don't like this choice or this option. But just as much as it's a numbers thing, it's also an emotional thing, because I believe we all care deeply for this district and the students and the staff and the people that live in this community. And looking long term, I feel like this is unfortunately the only option at the present time. But we need to stay vigilant, and we need to stay on top of things as a board and have accountability to make sure that as things improve, we're looking for ways to guide the district back to where we think it should be headed, absent global pandemics and things like that. With that, I'd like us to move to the roll call vote.
Mrs. Denman?
sorry, was there someone else who needed to speak? Okay, Mrs.
Yeah, it
Denon?
sounded like somebody was
No, I
saying
thought
something,
we
but I'm
need
not.
to make a motion.
I think we already did make a motion
This
in a
motion's already
second,
made.
didn't we?
That's why we had the
Yeah,
comments.
I'm
So we're
sorry.
looking-
Okay.
No problem.
Okay. Mr. Brophy?
Yes.
Ms. Nyman?
No.
Mrs. McWhorter?
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove?
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway?
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff?
No.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Foos?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-2.
Mr. President, moving to item 11E, 11F. Memorandum of Understanding regarding a reduction from a full-time to a part-time of a temporary professional employee under the same circumstances that were previously read. This memorandum is specific to status changing from a full-time to a part-time temporary professional employee. So the administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approves this memorandum regarding the reduction from full-time to part-time of a temporary professional employee as presented.
Deeroff moved.
Had a motion. Is there a second?
McWhorter, second.
It sounded like Ms. McWhorter. Do we have any comments or questions on this additional MOU? All right, with that, we'll move to roll call vote.
Mrs. Denon?
Yes.
Mr. Brophy?
Yes.
Ms. Nyman?
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter?
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove?
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway?
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Foos?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Item number 11G is approval of the 2020-2021 proposed final budget. In accordance with the Special Session Act 1 of 2006, the Boyertown Area School District must adopt a proposed final budget and establish a proposed real estate tax rates for the upcoming school year. The proposed final budget must be approved at least 30 days prior to the adoption of the final budget. Currently, the final budget for Boyertown Area School District is scheduled for adoption on June 23rd, 2020. Administration recommends the approval of the proposed final budget for the 2020-2021 fiscal year as presented.
Looking for any motions?
McWhorter motions.
Denning
I'll
seconds.
All right, we're gonna go McWhorter, and I'm gonna give that one to Mr. Updegrove for the second. Any comments or questions on the proposed final budget? I see two people with their hands raised, so we'll start with Ms. McWhorter.
I just wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Pitts and her staff, her group, because they've done a good job in very difficult circumstances of putting this together and gathering all the information that we needed in a relatively short amount of time because of the of COVID-19, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Next, I have Ms. Denon.
Yes, thank you. I too want to thank Mrs. Pitts. I, as the Facilities and Finance Chair, we have worked and a long time on this, and I know how hard she has worked answering all of my questions and other board members' questions as we tried to find ways that we could mitigate some of the things that we've had to do. So I just want to personally thank her and the rest of the administration for providing all of the information and all of the data that we had asked for as we have to go through this really difficult process. So just again, thank you so much.
I don't see any other hands. I know some people have had trouble with that feature though. So does anybody else want to comment or have any questions on this? All right, I would like to, before we move to the vote, I want to echo those sentiments. As I said earlier, we were proceeding with a budget. I thought it was going well. They were looking at things critically and really trying to bring down that reliance on the use of one-time funds, the fund balance that we were using. And then suddenly a big hole was blown in the whole thing. Several weeks ago, Ms. Pitts has been doing a great job, but she is nearing rounding out her time with us. And I think she saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and somebody decided that they had other plans and to make this much more difficult. I greatly appreciate her being able to adapt to that. I think that we benefited from having her during this, and it's been really, really reassuring to have somebody with her knowledge guiding us through this process. With that, let's move to a roll call vote.
Mrs. Denon?
Yes.
Mr. Brophy?
Yes.
Ms. Nyman?
No.
Mrs. McWhorter?
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove?
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway?
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff?
No.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Foose?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Moving to item,
How could that be?
That one out.
Mrs. Pitts, can you repeat the vote again?
I'm sorry. I did say 9-0. I apologize. It's motion carries 7-2.
That's fine, Carol. I mean, Mrs. Pitts.
It's been a long week.
I know it has. That's why I said it's fine.
Thank you for correcting me.
moving on to item 11H, personnel. The administration puts forth the following retirements from administration. Mr. Rupert is retiring effective August 15th. I want to take a point of privilege, Mr. President, to publicly thank Mr. Rupert for his service. I believe he's been at Middle School East for about 14 years. And it has been a pleasure for my 2 years to have had opportunity to work with him. Additionally, we have on the classified staff, Ms. Sharon Bauer, our principal's secretary for Colbrickdale. Resignations is Ms. Lisa Dorenzo, who has served as the acting principal. I would like to take this opportunity to publicly thank Ms. Dorenzo for stepping in and helping us. We're also happy to congratulate her on her selection and appointment to serve as a principal and why missing a school district this coming year. We'd like to also present to you the co-curricular activities for Gregory Miller and Trina Cross. We have a change in status for one professional employee. We also have 4 professional employees who have submitted requests for leave of absence or FMLA. At this time, we'd like to request approval from the Board of School Directors for the personnel items as presented.
Nyman moves.
Updegrove seconds.
Thank you. Ms. Nyman moves and Mr. Updegrove seconds. Can we, do we have any comments or questions on personnel?
I'd like to,
Go ahead, Roger.
Mr. Updegrove, you want to go first? Go ahead.
on Mr. Rupert, I congratulate you on your retirement because I had you on my bus quite a few times this past year, and you've always worked well for me as far as settling my kids down, and I thank you for that.
That is a unique perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Ms. Denon.
Yes, I too just want to thank Mr. Rupert. He is not only my neighbor, but he has is a friend, and I have worked with him over the years. Although my children did not go to East, I worked with him on getting the youth and government program started. And I just know how well respected he is by his colleagues, parents, and students. And secondly, I just want to thank also Mrs. Bauer. All the years that I have gone into Colbrookdale Elementary to read or volunteer or substitute teach at her school, she always was so pleasant, and it was such a friendly face when I walked into that school. So I just want to congratulate her on her retirement and thank both of them. And finally, Mrs. Dorenzo, I just want to wish her the best. I did not have that much of an opportunity to work with her, but I do appreciate her stepping in when we needed someone at Colbrookdale, and I wish her the best at YMSing.
Next, I have Ms. Hogan, but I did hear Ms. Nyman earlier. I didn't know if she wanted to get in the queue.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so we'll go Ms. Hogan and then Ms. Nyman.
I have my hand up too.
And then Ms. Deroff after that.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks. As a parent of a middle school East student, I just wanted to congratulate Mr. Rupert on his retirement, thank him for his service. He's an excellent principal. It's a really great loss to lose him, so thank you. I'd like to congratulate Mrs. Bauer on her retirement as well, and congratulate Ms. Dorenzo on her new position at YMSing. I did have a little bit of contact with her this year as I went to read at Colbrookdale for Read Across America, and she was really wonderful and lovely, super warm, and from what I hear from parents, she was very much beloved. So congratulations to everyone. Thanks.
Next, Ms. Nyman.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations to Mr. Rupert. I guess he probably can't wait to get out of here with all this going on. I too, as a former bus driver, had him on my bus, or him or Mr. Kale, and they were both very great when I had to have them on. Mrs. Bauer was a great help at Coperdale when I needed her. So congratulations to her. Mrs. Dorenzo, she had tough shoes to fill when Mr. Stout left. She filled them. Kids loved her. It's going to be another sad time for Coperdale for another principal coming in. But congratulations to her on getting another position. You deserve it, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Deroff and then Mr. Hemingway.
Okay, same here goes. Kudos to Mr. Rupert and to the secretary at Coperdale, Mrs. Bauer. I remember her when she was at the high school. And to Lisa Dorenzo, I'm heartbroken that you're leaving, but I understand, and good luck in your new job. The real reason I wanted to talk was if we're hiring these coaches, the assistant track coach, I guess that's the only one that's on here tonight. If there's, we don't know if there's going to be sports next year in the fall. We're it's kind of an unknown thing. My question is, if we hire them, are we obligated to pay them if we're shut down again, let's say for the sports or that particular sport? How does that work?
First and foremost, we have to plan as if we're going to function. So that's why they're being appointed. And secondly, if depending on what the law and the status is, that's what we will follow. As you know, that Act 13, which passed, guided what would happen with the compensation of employees. So depending on what status we are and guidance from the state, that will determine what actions we take at that time, or whether it's a total local decision left up to the local school division.
That's why I was curious, can we afford to hire people that we don't know if we're going to use?
Dr. Bedden and Mrs. Deroff, this is Mia Kim. If I may
Yeah.
clarify, those two coaches are the ones who have served current school year prior to the shutdown. It's 1920 school year. They're not for next school year. Just want to let you know. Those
It
two
says-
names.
It says updates. What's the update then?
What that means, we did have folks that were approved and submitted previously, but these two names came to us on the later end. So they were prorated. So that's why it's called the update for current school year. They're not for 2021 school year.
I'm confused, but you know what you're doing, I guess. So, okay, I withdraw my question.
All right, thank you. And next, Mr. Hemingway. Or, yeah, is that correct? Yes, Mr. Hemingway, please.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate Mr. Rupert and thank him. I had two of my kids go through his hallways, and I truly believe that he was a positive influence in their school career and really did set them up for success. So thank you very much, sir. That's it.
All right. Similarly, I want to thank all the folks named and Mr. Rupert. Heard great things, had pleasant interactions, and I'm disappointed that my own children won't have the opportunity to be there during your time. But thank you for all the service you provided to the district, as well as Mrs. Bauer over there at Colbert-Dale, and Mr. Renzo. I wish you best of luck. I think everybody on this personnel, it's always tough. You don't want to leave anybody out, but it's a testament to the people that we have here that we always want to thank them. I don't see any other comments or questions at this time, so we will move to roll call vote for personnel.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhirter,
Yes.
Mr. Updergrove, Mr. Updergrove, you are muted.
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deroff,
With regrets, yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
This time it really is 9-0.
All right, the next item we have is old business.
I'm sorry, that's me. No old business.
All right, and then we have board comments, and I see a few hands shot up. So I will go in this order to begin. Ms. Hogan, Mr. Hemingway. Or I don't know if those are left over from the previous topic.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't put my hand down. I'll put it down now.
Not a problem.
Same with me, hand down.
Okay, yeah, I saw that. So does anybody want to get in the queue right now? After a 3-hour meeting last night, I can understand nobody's rushing to raise their hand when we're close to wrapping up. So I won't add any commentary at this time either. We will move to upcoming meeting dates. All upcoming meeting dates can be found on our VASD website calendar. We do not have anything scheduled on the date of the primary election, but definitely check the district website and calendar for all of our other meetings that are coming up.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
to that point, I just want to make sure the board members did note that because of the change in the primary elections, our meeting was moved to that Wednesday. So just make sure they noted that on their calendars.
Right. Thank you. It's an important reminder for us and for the public as well. Thank you for that. All right. With that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Nyman moves.
Aren't you having public comment?
We already had oh, sorry. There's nobody signed up for public comment too. I apologize for skipping that. I did hear one motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Mr. Updegrove seconds. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.